All right. It is great to see everybody here today. Welcome to Frontline. I know we have a lot of guests here today as well, so if this is your first time joining us, I just want to say I'm really, really glad you're here. I also want to say to all of the kind of the regulars around here, if you see somebody that you don't know, I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you a clue, okay? Sometimes you see somebody you don't know and you're like, am I supposed to know them? Have they been here before? I don't want to look embarrassed maybe by going up to them when they've been here for 20 years. I mean, have you ever done that before? So I'm going to give you something. You walk up to somebody and you say, hey, I'm John. I'm not sure if we've met. If you say that, that's an easy way. It's an easy way to say, yeah, I met you last week, but you have a really bad short-term memory problem, or something like that. So if you see somebody around that you don't know, just say, hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm really glad you're here. Have we met before? Something like that. Just make sure we're welcoming as a church. Also, I wanted to point out that we have some newlyweds with us today. There's a certain glow. I don't know if you see it from the middle over here for Justin and Kenna Reamersma, but you other guys want to stand up there? All right, there we go. Justin and Kenna. All right, there we go. Welcome. Congratulations, guys. He just so happens to be my nephew, which makes you now like my niece. Is that what it is? Welcome to the family. So, I got to be honest with you guys. I have struggled with this sermon for months. And I'm being very serious with you. For months. And the reason why is because I kept asking God, can I do something different? You see, we're going through the book of James, and we're continuing on, and we've got some stuff that's coming up starting, remember, September 8th and 9th and 10th. We've got John Lynch coming, the Freedom and Grace Conference. After that, we start something different the week of the 17th going forward, which means I have to wrap up James by Labor Day weekend. There's so much good stuff to talk about. I just didn't want to talk about this one today. If you guys are aware, if you've been around Frontline any length of time, you realize that when we do outdoor services, usually somebody is getting mustard or ketchup on them. Somebody is maybe hurting themselves with crashing over tables. There's something that's happening on an outdoor service, or there's water involved or something. That's what I kept wanting to do. The problem was, this passage doesn't allow for that. So I'm gonna read the passage for you. So I want you just be prepared for this. James, if you can turn there, James chapter 5, verse 1. We're going to read verses 1 through 6. James 5, 1 to 6. I'm sure it's going to be an encouragement for you. I'm sure. So James 5, 1 to 6, it says this. Now listen, you rich people. Weep and wail because of the misery that is coming upon you. Your wealth is rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workmen who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered innocent men who were not opposing you. Well, there's our passage for today. How many of you feel really encouraged after that section? I don't think any one of us. Now, there will be some who say, whew, thank goodness he's not talking to me, because he said, now listen, you rich people. So that's good. I mean, how many of us don't have to pay attention today? Right? Yeah, there we go. We're going to talk about that. But I want to start just a little bit. How many of you have ever played the lottery before? All right. How many of you are lying about the fact right now that you have never played the lottery before? So I remember I guess I was in college at the time. And a bunch of my coworkers got together. I think the Powerball or whatever was up to some massive number, and so a bunch of our coworkers went together and got some tickets. And And I remember watching. I was really encouraged by those numbers just to see what would happen. Well, clearly, I gave up my money. I didn't win anything. Thank goodness I didn't. So there's an article that I read this past week, and it was called 5 Reasons Why You Should Rip Up Your Lottery Ticket. I thought, well, now you have me encouraged. Now you have me paying attention right now. The first reason was this. Everyone will ask you for money. The comment was, once you are found out that you won the lottery, everyone will ask you for your money. Even people who you have never talked to maybe before. If they found out you won the lottery, they will assume you have money, therefore I can ask you. Everyone will ask you for money. Number 2, you become a target for thieves. In the article, it talked about all the people who were robbed, their houses were broken into, oftentimes at gunpoint. One guy actually got murdered. One person had cyanide given to them. They still haven't found the killer. You will be a target for thieves. Number 3, strained relationships. The divorce rate among lottery winners, anybody know? It's almost 80%. 78% of lottery winners are divorced. Get a divorce. Number 4, guilt and boredom. Some of you are like, man, I can't wait to win the lottery because I'm going to quit work and I'm going to go on vacations and do all that sort of stuff. And many of the lottery winners, if they were interviewed, tremendous guilt because everybody else is doing something and they got money, and so there's this guilt because we're meant to be productive. There's something in us that says we should be productive. And then the last one, it can change you for the worse. I thought this was interesting. 70% of lottery winners are bankrupt within a few years. Now you think to yourself, man, if I won $10 million, I would be happy, happy, happy. Statistically, the answer is no way. You wouldn't be. You wouldn't be. So if you've been holding a lottery ticket just for the day when you get to go cash that thing in, maybe you want to rip it up. Now some of you would say, there is no way. I'm willing to take the chance and be the statistic that says I can do it. It's hard to say. The article finished with the words, be careful what you wish for. I want you to turn in your Bibles to Luke chapter 12, please. Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12 and verse 13. For those of you who know me, you know that I like to move, but I was told that I have to stay right here. So you can thank our sound man as he encouraged me. So I'm going to be like a caged lion going back and forth here, I think. Luke chapter 12, verse 13. Someone in the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. How many of you have ever had a problem with an inheritance or a family member or known of somebody? You know that brings out the best in people, right? The reading of the will, the disbursement of family assets, it just really brings out the best. And so you can just picture Jesus is there, he's teaching, and some guy says, hey, you're an authority, tell my brother over here to divide the inheritance, because he doesn't want to. Jesus' response is interesting. Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you? And then he said to them, not just to the guy, he says to the crowd. So he says, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you? I'm not here to make the decision, but I want to tell all of you here. I want to tell everybody. Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And then he told him a parable. The ground of a certain rich man produced a good crop. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. And then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns, and I'll build bigger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, you fool. This very night your life will be demanded from you, and then you will get what you have prepared for yourself. And then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with anyone who stores up things for himself, but is not rich toward God. Basically, what the principle was, what Jesus was saying was, he says, so many people look at money as, man, if I only had money, then I'd be happy. Then I would have life. Then I could really enjoy things. This man says, hey, I need my inheritance because my brother's not giving it to me. If he would give it to me, I would have life. And Jesus says, watch out. Be very careful. The more you start seeking after things, the more trouble you can get into. How many of you hear and listen to the rich man? This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns, build bigger ones, and I'll store all my grain and my goods. You have plenty of good things laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. Isn't that the American dream? I'm not busting anybody here, but that's what we're told. We're told to save and invest and do all those sort of things. You work hard during the years, and then you get to a place, especially you get to retirement. When you get to retirement, what do you get to do? You get to take life easy. You get to eat. You get to drink. You get to be merry. That's what you get to do. We look at that and go, yeah, good, that's good. He did a good thing. Jesus says, whoa, not so fast. Do you understand what just happened? Jesus turns it around because he says, this man, all of his life was spent just trying to make his life comfortable. That's what it was. It was all about him. It was all about his life. He said, I have all this stuff. Let's build bigger barns so that I can be even more comfortable. Unfortunately, when his life was taken from him, his life was spent focusing on this rather than on this. And that's where Jesus would get in. And so what does he say? He says, rather than focusing on God, he focused on himself. And he says, don't do that. He said, be rich toward God. What does that mean? It means to use our earthly riches to show how much we value God. Let me say that again. To be rich toward God means you use your earthly riches, you use your wealth to show just how much you value God. So I'm going to ask you, when you come to the things that you have, how much would your riches, how much would the things that you own tell somebody about how much you value God? That's kind of the gist of this. I'll ask you the question this way. What do your resources say about you? So I'm going to give you just 2 points today because I have no screens in the back to help you remember anything. I'm just going to make it super simple. Get, and use your wealth wisely. Get and use your wealth wisely. So the first point today, get your wealth wisely. Now, let's go back to our passage in James, please. Because some of you are like, okay, let's get back there. Let's see. I want to see what he does with this terrible passage. Now listen, you rich people. Well, like we said, for most of us, we would go, man, thank goodness I'm not rich. I hate those rich people. They drive me nuts. You know, the 1% of the people, you know, they're always extorting and taking advantage of people and everything. And so, man, I don't like the rich people. If we were to focus if we were to take our focus, and rather than just focusing on us as Americans, and actually take a global focus, I want to give you some statistics here. Very, very interesting. Study done back in 2022 about the median income of the world. How many of you would like to take a guess about what the median income is, the average income all around the world? Yes, Sarah? More than that, a lot more than that. $1.57 does not make it very far. Maybe that's a day, I don't know. How many of you, median income, annual income for the year? What do you think? Any ideas? 10,000, 25,000, 5,000? What do you think? 100,000. That's a lot. Anybody else? That's a guess. That's a good guess. All right. The answer is $2,800. That's the median income globally. Anybody have any idea what the median household income is in America?
42,000.
42,000. 35,000? 28,000?
25.
25. It's a lot higher.
55.
55. $1,700? That's go up a lot. But you had the right numbers. 71,000. $71,000. Sorry, I did it. $71,000. That's the annual income in America. So that tells you that the average income in America for the household, not just for the individual, but the household, annual income, 71,000. The annual income for households around the world is 2,800. That means the average American makes 25 times the amount that people make around the world. If you make individually 60 grand or more a year, if you make 60 grand or more a year, you are in the top 1% of wage earners in the world. I'm not going to ask how many of you make more than 60 grand a year. But that just gives you the sense of really, when you think about it, 60 grand a year. Now, for most of us here, we would say that's a good salary. Others would be like, man, I'd love to make 60 grand a year. But for most of us here, we would say that's a good salary. I wouldn't call that rich, but that means you're in the top 1%. So it gives you a sense that here in America, we have a lot of things that we just kind of take for granted. How many of you flushed a toilet this morning? Hopefully everybody did, actually. How many of you would say, man, that's a sign of wealth to have a functioning toilet? Most of us would be like, that's just an expectation to have a functioning toilet. People around the world, many people don't even have toilets, much less functioning ones, much less their own. How many of you, be honest here, how many of you own more than one toilet? Most people do. Most people have more than one toilet. And yet, the world over, most people would say that's a luxury. As I went through this whole thing, what I wanted to do was not to be able to say, oh, you're all rich, that means he's coming down after you. What I wanted to do was put it into a little bit of perspective here. That we actually, as Americans, are a bit richer than what we think. But we just see our society here and we don't expect that. We don't, it doesn't seem that way. My family and I had an opportunity to go to be in a place. We were in Curacao and Bonaire for about 6 months on a mission trip. And it was very interesting because we became one of the locals. Bonaire is very much a touristy destination. Probably 5 out of 7 days out of the week, massive cruise ships would pull into port and dump people off. There was people everywhere. And it was very interesting to watch the Americans get off the boat. How many of you are aware that Americans are not necessarily well loved in a lot of places? You can always spot the Americans. They always have their American flags on or something, they get off the boat. But one of the things that you could also spot, oftentimes there was a sense of entitlement that we would see. I am an American. Therefore, you need to take better care of me. I deserve better service. I deserve better things. And we would do this. And it was actually, I kind of wanted to distance myself of the fact that I was an American. Now, trust me, I love being an American. But it made me realize that as Americans, because of what we have and the things that we possess, a lot of times we can look down on others thinking they're probably not as good as we are. So I want to put it into context here because I want us all to understand this could be you. This could be me. A lot of it just comes down to what are we doing with our wealth and are we doing it wisely? So let's go back to this. Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming upon you. In AD 70, Jerusalem was pretty much ransacked, destroyed, obliterated by the Romans. So it's possible that James was kind of understanding this is kind of a foreshadowing that's coming. But I think really what it is this is what we theologians call a near-far fulfillment. In AD 70, which was just probably 35 years after James wrote the book, that's when Jerusalem was ransacked, destroyed. And I'm not sure what good your wealth will do then. How many of you are familiar with a place called Pompeii? Remember Pompeii? There was a mountain called Mount Vesuvius. AD 79, Mount Vesuvius blows up. And do you know what that ash did? It destroyed rich and poor homes alike. Completely covered it, buried in feet. In some places as high as 9 feet of ash that were just buried, just like this. It didn't matter whether you were rich or poor, it just was gone. Jerusalem back in AD 70, same type thing. When the Romans came in, it didn't matter whether you were rich or poor. It was not a good day for you. The misery that is coming on you. Your wealth is rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. Now, James is going after the three main indicators of how wealthy you were. Back in his day, if you had a lot of grain, then you were considered wealthy. If you had a lot of gold, you were considered wealthy. If you had a lot of garments, you were considered wealthy. And so people would maybe have barns, they would store up a bunch of grain. That was your asset. Some of you are farmers, you know what it's like. The silo is full. That's an asset that you own. Or for some of you, I know what your shoe collection looks like. You have a lot of money tied up in your shoes. Or leave the shoes alone. Okay, I won't go there. You may have a lot of money tied up in something like that. But in their day, there was garments that they would store. And so you would walk around. I picture like these rich people having their $10,000 suits or whatever, and they stroll around because this is a sign. I may bring out all my watches that I wear when I have just the right one for the occasion. But that was the idea. If your grain, your garments, and your gold, those were the three things. And James goes at every one of them. He says your wealth has rotted. The grain is just, it's rotting before you. Your gold is actually corroding. Now, does gold rust? It doesn't rust. Silver and gold don't rust. It doesn't, not what it is. But the idea is there is this corrosion, this thing that's eating it away, that's literally eating you. It's testifying against you. You have hoarded wealth in the last days. Now I have a question for you. I'm sure, how many of you are Dutch around here? Got some good Dutch people around here. I'm Pennsylvania Dutch, but I don't think that counts. But Dutch people are known to be savers, aren't they? Some would use the word frugal. Some would use the word stingy. Just depends, but there is something in it that's kind of bound up in being Dutch that says we're to be good savers. Now I'll ask you, what is the difference between saving and hoarding? Think about that for a second. What is the difference between saving and hoarding? How many of you here are good savers? How many of you here are good hoarders? I mean, now to use the term saver, we would say, yeah, I'm a good saver. Some of you are like, that's terrible. I'm a good spender, right? Can I get any amens among the crowd? Yes, amen. We're good savers, but what is it that takes that distinction from being I'm a good saver to I'm a good hoarder? What's the difference? You see, the difference is saving, just like that illustration from Pastor Ben, that dollar isn't bad or good. That dollar is simply a tool. It can be used for bad or for good. If I save the dollar, I can use the dollar for good. But if I save the dollar simply to be used for me only, now I'm hoarding. Now, does that mean that we can't save for our own enjoyment? That's not the case. But remember what Jesus said to the rich person. He said, if you save, if you do this, but you're not rich toward God. Remember what it was to be rich toward God? To use your earthly riches to show how much you value God. To use your earthly riches to show how much you value God. If I don't take that and use that to value God, and I don't prioritize Him, His needs, not that God has needs, the things that He is passionate about, if I don't do that, now I cross the line and I go from simply just saving to I'm hoarding. James says that's a problem. And then he goes on, he says, look, the wages you failed to pay the workmen who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. The wages you didn't pay the harvesters to pay the workmen are crying out against you. So there was a rule back in Deuteronomy. I'll read this for you. Deuteronomy 24, verse 14. Do not take advantage of a hired man who is poor and needy, whether he is a brother Israelite or an alien living in one of your towns. Pay him his wages each day before sunset, because he is poor and counting on it. Otherwise, he may cry to the Lord against you, and you will be guilty of sin. So the illustration was, back in Jesus' day, about 80% of the people lived at or below poverty level. Tremendous need back in Jesus' day. And therefore, many people, they were workers out in the fields. They would do their thing. But they get to the end of the day, and they were literally hand them out. There was truly living day to day, paycheck to paycheck, but that paycheck better be there today. In other words, if I don't get paid today, I may not eat today. And so, this is the poor person. He says, okay, can I work in your field? The owner says, yes, I will let you work in my field. And so the person goes out, puts in a full day's wage, or a full day's work, and goes at the end of the day and says to the owner, I would like my paycheck. And the owner says, no, not today. How many days would you be okay with that?
0.
So I had a procedure done this past week, and I had to fast for about a day and a half. Only liquids. If you know what that means, you probably know what I had done this past week. I was starving. I mean, starving. I got to the end. I mean, I had to go to a family fair to go buy some stuff. I like all the Gatorades. You know what I'm talking about. I had to go get that stuff, and I'm walking through the aisle going, I could eat that. I would eat even that. I don't even like that, but I would eat it right now. I'm so hungry. Just walking through the aisles, going through the thing. If I was bound to this rich man, and I said, I put in a day's wage, I put in my labor, but if he's not going to pay me, well, man, I'm going to be pretty hungry. Well, what if I go back the next day? I say, are you going to pay me today? And he says, sure, I'll pay you today. Today is the day I'll pay you. But he doesn't do it again. And then he says the words, what are you going to do about it? Think about it. Back in Jesus' day, much like in our day, the rich can get away with an awful lot. And there are times when you feel unjust, right? You feel like an injustice was done. Would that be an injustice? Absolutely. And so the rich person says, what are you going to do about it? And as a result, you go, well, there's not much I can do about it because I can't go to the law. The rich probably have them in their back pocket. Thank goodness that doesn't happen today. Whatever the situation may be, where do I go? How do I get any sort of justice? But this is what it says. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. Now, the Lord Almighty makes it sound like He's the God who is omnipotent. He's all-powerful. He can do everything. That's what it makes it sound like. But actually, the word there for the Lord Almighty is not the Lord who is all-powerful and can do anything. It's the Lord who has an army behind Him. It's the Lord of armies, the Lord of hosts. That's what it is. So it's kind of one of those things where, you know, you've got the man who's right here, and you're up against the man. And so you're facing this person, and you know there's no way you're going to beat him. And so the person who's here says, what are you going to do about it? Kind of like the playground bully. What are you going to do about it? And then you look behind that person, and you realize your big brother, who knows all sorts of martial arts or something, is standing behind him. And you go, you have no idea what's just about to come to you. That's kind of the idea. as we look and we say, the rich person says, I have all the power, I can do whatever I want. But we look behind the rich person and we realize we have a God who cares about the poor. He cares about those who are being taken advantage of. The Lord is not short on being able to have options of what to do. And so that's the thing. When we look at this, he says, okay, how do we get our wealth wisely? Well, here's the thing. Number one, it's not to say we don't save. Saving is good. I mean, the Bible tells us to save. It's good for us. But you really, both of us have to look and say, are we saving for ourselves or are we saving for the things of God? Am I saving to bless God? Am I saving to bless others? Or am I saving just to be eating and drinking and making myself merry? That's something that I have to ask. Am I saving or am I hoarding? The second thing is, how do I get my wealth wisely? Based on this passage, am I cheating to get it? Am I cheating to get it? Now, some would say, well, I'm not an employer, so I don't need to pay attention to this. Well, that's kind of true. This is an indictment against employers who maybe have the opportunity to bless others and be generous toward others, but are not. They're saying, I would rather take more profits for myself than be a blessing and being generous to others. So I would say to you who are employers, those of you who pay wages to somebody else, are you blessing the people who work for you? Are you blessing those who become a blessing to other people? Are you doing that? I think that's what James would say. James is not short on calling people out. And so if you have an opportunity to be a blessing, are you doing that? But I want to talk about to those who maybe are not employers. Maybe you're an employee, and I'm going to ask you, are you cheating to get your wealth? Are you cheating to get your wealth? How do we cheat to get our wealth? Well, you ever heard the phrase, putting in a full day's work? You ever heard that phrase before? Putting in a full day's work. Now, some people, they do it. They really work hard, and they're like, you know what, I'm just thankful that I have a job. I love what I do what I do. But others go, I am not paid what I'm worth. I know I'm worth more than this. Therefore, I'm gonna work 80% because I think that's what I'm being paid. I'm being paid 80% the amount that I'm worth. So therefore, I'm going to slow it down a little bit. Or maybe it's the employee pilferage thing. Man, they don't pay me enough around here, so it doesn't matter if I take all these papers, make all these copies, do all these sort of things. It doesn't matter. It's just mine. I'll ask you, are you cheating to get the wealth that you have? So it's not just for the rich people. It really is the question for all of us. Am I getting my wealth wisely? So if I go on, we'll go on to the last part, because there's only 2 points today. The second part is this: am I using my wealth wisely? If you go back to the passage here, verse 5, you have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. Now this is a very interesting picture. How many of you are understand what the day of slaughter is? Does everybody kind of have an idea on that? So, here's the picture. You've been fattening up an animal all year. Now, how do you fatten up an animal? What do you do to the animal? You feed it, you give it the best food, right? Now, why do you do that? You get more for dinner. I love it. That's right. My man, that's right. The reason why you fatten something up is so that when the day of slaughter comes, the fat animal gets taken first, right? So the picture that we have here is you have this person, you have the rich people who are like, ooh, man, look at this. It was a sign back then of kind of wealth. If you were fat, that was a sign of wealth. I mean, you had enough to be fat. Otherwise, people weren't very fat back then. So here you have the person who is fattening themselves up, and James uses a very vivid image here, and he says, you have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. Now, what's the day of slaughter? How many of you ever heard the expression of outrunning a bear? You ever heard that expression? How would you outrun a bear? Well, technically, you only have to run faster than the person next to you, right? I mean, technically, if you're with somebody and as long as you can run faster than them, technically, if the bear's that hungry, he's going to get them. That's the picture here. It says, okay, the day is coming where things are going to be bad, but the people who have fattened themselves, the people who are really overweight or whatever else, rather than being able to move out of the way of danger, they have fattened themselves and they can't go anywhere. That's the picture. And so, on the one hand, we would say when things are good, we look at wealth as a privilege, as a good thing. Man, I wish I was wealthy. But when it comes to getting out of the way of troubles, maybe now I don't want to be that way. How many of you have seen maybe pictures of the Great Depression back in 1929? I don't think anybody here lived through it. I don't know, maybe somebody here did. The Great Depression back in 1929. It was a terrible time, and people who were wealthy, extremely wealthy, they went from living in the lap of luxury to being in the food line and having nothing, absolutely nothing. What happened? When the stock markets crashed, they lost everything. The suicide rates went through the roof because they didn't know what to do. Those who knew what it was like to live with poverty and trouble, they weren't greatly affected. They already knew it. But those who had everything did not have any clue as to what to do. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, are we using our wealth wisely? I want you to turn in your Bibles to 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17. 1 Timothy chapter 6, back just a little bit, in verse 17. It says this: "Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment." Is it wrong to be rich? It is not. It is not wrong to be rich. In fact, is it something that we can say, man, I really want to be rich because I want to be able to use it for our enjoyment? It's biblical. There's nothing wrong with it. But then he keeps going. "Put their hope in God, though, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In this way they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life." I want to point out something real quick as we're wrapping up here. What is the life that is truly life? The world tells you money is life. The more money you have, the more life you'll get to enjoy. That's what we're told. And we pursue it, and so many people pursue it, and they throw away everything oftentimes in the pursuit of it. Can we find enjoyment in money? Absolutely. But when our life becomes all about the money, remember, Jesus says you can't serve two masters. You'll either love one and hate the other, or love the other and hate the one. If we serve God, we can find enjoyment in the things of God, and we can find enjoyment here. But if we serve money, there will be no life or enjoyment. And that's what James is getting at too. He says, are we using our wealth wisely? Are we really saying, God, I get rid of the lie of the world. The lie says I have to have more money to have life. And the answer is no. I can find life just the way I am with you, God. And I accept that. And so am I using my wealth wisely? And so if we go back here, James, back to our last little verse here. "You have condemned and murdered innocent men who were not opposing you." Some have said, well, this is probably not talking literally, Probably not talking literally here. I mean, murder's not going on. Well, I tend to believe it's very literal here. I think this was back in the day when the rich held all the cards. They had all the power. And as a result, they used it not for their own gain, but they used it not to bless others, but for their own gain. And so they would maybe frame somebody, whatever else. People were being murdered all in the pursuit of money. Which hopefully nobody of us here has murdered anybody or gotten somebody framed because of wanting money. But I will ask you this. How many of you, in your pursuit of money, have you lost a relationship? Maybe it was a marriage, maybe it was a family, maybe it was a friend. Maybe there was a good friend you had, and because of a loan that you gave them that ended up separating you guys or something. Maybe money has separated you. I don't know what it is. But how many people have maybe just thrown their lives away? I wish I could go around and take a mic at how money has maybe adversely impacted you and how it's benefited you. And I'll bet you there'd be some stories in a group like this. The question that we all have to ask ourselves, am I getting my wealth wisely? Am I doing it in the right way? Am I saving it to bless others, to be generous toward others, or am I hoarding it? Am I cheating others to get it? Hopefully not. And then am I using my wealth wisely? Am I using it not just to put my hope in this stuff in hopes that I can get all the things out of retirement or get all the things out of new toys or whatever else that I can, but instead of it, it's really just being about, God, I want to use it for you. That's my question. Am I getting and using it wisely? And so, as we wrap up today, I'll ask you two questions. Normally I put this on the screen, but I don't have a screen today. So I'll ask you this. If you have gotten your wealth unwisely today, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Maybe you need to repay somebody. Maybe there's somebody that you need to repay today. Maybe there's an employee that maybe you took advantage of that you need to bless them. Go out of your way to bless them. I don't know what it is. If you got your wealth unwisely, maybe it's you owe an apology to your boss. Maybe you need to bring some stuff back to the office that you took home. I don't know what it is, but if you got it unwisely, make it right today. Also, if you're using your wealth unwisely, what are you going to do about it? If it's all about you, if it's just, I exist for my comfort, my pleasure, what are you going to do about that? Are you going to take and say, God, we've got money. I may be young, but God, you blessed us with something. I want to be a blessing to somebody else. God really calls us. He says, it is more blessed to give than to receive. Now, thankfully, there is no strings attached to this sermon. It's not like we have some stewardship campaign going on or anything that I'm going to say, now I'm going to tell you the real reason why I preach this message. No, it's not that at all. It's part of the story. It's part of the book of James, and I'm preaching it. But I will say, there is something that happens when we are generous toward the things of God. And I'm telling you, you will never be unhappy. And God always provides. He always does. So as we close in prayer, I just want to give you a chance, just you and God. Money is a sticky subject, I get it. So I want you just to talk to God just a little bit about your own situation. And then I'll close in prayer. God, I would say that probably most people here in this place, including myself, would not identify ourselves as being rich. But in the eyes of the world, we really are. We are truly a blessed people. It's very, very easy for us to get into some bad habits of maybe getting our wealth in not so healthy ways, not so wise ways, or we're using it in not so wise ways. And so, God, I pray that today will be a day when maybe if you bring something to my mind, all of our minds, if there's something that we're supposed to do, that we would have the courage and the boldness to do it. That we wouldn't be afraid, we would just trust you with our wealth. And may we value you and your things in life way more than we value our own comforts. But God, I gotta know. I know you have blessed us, and every time we put you first, every time I put you first, I'm always blessed. And so, God, may we have the courage and the boldness to put our wealth in your hands for your sake, for your glory. In Jesus' name we pray. And all those in agreement said, amen.